Also from a geopolitical point of view, do you want to preserve your strategic autonomy or not? We saw the consequences of this during COVID. We've seen it in the Ukraine-Russia war. We see it now with the Iran-US conflict. So this is something which we need to bear in mind when we make loose statements about do we really care about de-industrialization or not.
Hello everyone. Spring is really here at last, and today I'm in the Zurich countryside overlooking the long, slender and very attractive lake of Zurich, known locally as the Zurichsee. And I'm wholly in the industrial sector of business today. That's our focus, and I'm on the premises of Dow Incorporated, formerly known as Dow Chemical, an important Fortune 500 company, ranked 82. When I checked, it was 2024, and it was founded in 1897. So it holds a long and commanding position in what's referred to as the business-to-business, B2B sector. And to clarify that expression, it's integrally involved in hundreds, perhaps thousands of retail products virtually unknown to the general public unless they happen to be specialist consumers. And so it's a brand that's likely not to be a household name, or to put it another way, recalled by many, but most cannot remember what for. I'm with Marco ten Bruggencate. He's the top man here, and I'm really pleased to be able to welcome him to the show today. Marco's title, and I want to be sure that I get this right, is that he's president of Industrial Intermediaries and Infrastructure here in the Europe, Middle East, Africa area, with an oversight of EMEI, which is a long abbreviation. But let's get into the first question. Marco, thanks for welcoming me to Horgen and to your office, and it's good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, and it's great to have you here in the lovely Horgen offices with, like you rightfully said, beautiful day, great view.
It's a magnificent day. Yeah. And Marco, please tell me briefly, what does Dow make, and give me an idea and size and scale of the company.
Sure.
What difference do its products make to the lives of consumers across the world? Because you touch many lives in many places.
Absolutely, we do. Now, maybe just to go a little bit back in time, we're a 125-year young company, or over 125 years now. Started and founded in 1897 by a person called Herbert H. Dow. He was really a pioneer in his field. He started one company which went bankrupt. He set up another company he was ousted from. But what he did is he really was a pioneer in the space of using an electrical current to separate bromides from brine. And the third company, which was set up in Midland, Michigan, became ultimately, after a lot of perseverance, a success. And today, I can say we are a company with still the spirit of do it better of our founder, operating in 29 countries, more than 30,000 people, approximately revenues of $40 billion. And I think many people use our products every day without probably even realizing or knowing it. It could be in your hair, Michael, or in your sunscreen, in the roads you drove on this morning, in your roofs, your insulation of the house, the car, food packaging, electronics, and I can go on and on and on. So, the chemical industry is really, I would say, the cornerstone of many of the of the value chains within the European industry. And it's absolutely essential for the transformation, and we'll talk more about that, from that clean transition, and as they like to call it in Europe, the Green Deal. And it's strategically important to be able to achieve that. And as an industry, I mean, just to show you how important that industry is, we've got 1.2 million jobs directly in that industry and another 3 million jobs indirectly. But most people seem to have forgotten that how things are really made and don't really associate the chemical industry with an industry which enables transformation, like artificial intelligence. I mean, we make products to make data centers more energy efficient with our cooling solutions. We enable the whole renewables rollout and build out, where we provide our resins and products to produce cables for the energy sector in a more efficient way. But also renewables, photovoltaic panels, where we provide the films to provide a better operating efficiency, more electricity output, and also improve the reliability. And the last one I would say is e-mobility is super important. We enable, in many respects, the ability of use of batteries, the charging infrastructure, but also a better user experience when it comes to digital displays and lightweighting of the vehicle, which then enables, obviously, a longer range for these electrical vehicles. So, yeah.
So you really touch so many corners
Yes.
of people's lives, not just corners, but aspects of people's lives.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about strategy, Marco, next. The last time we spoke, you mentioned a phrase which probably is not yet top of mind to many listeners, but will be to those involved in running manufacturing businesses, investors and stakeholders in the broadest sense of the word, or those planning future strategies for those businesses. The phrase that you used was the de-industrialisation of Europe, the de-industrialisation of Europe. Please tell me more. Is there a clear trend towards this de-industrialisation on the continent here? What's the evidence? What's the rate of contraction, if that can be measured? And why is this such a worry to you? Mm-hmm. Why is it happening? Yeah. And is it inevitable, or is it just a case of managing the decline, a bit like people used to say about Venice?
Yeah, you know? It's good questions. Well, first of all, de-industrialization is certainly happening in Europe. And I'll give you a couple of stats. Earlier this year, Roland Berger launched a study which is called the European Chemical Closures and Investment Radar. And it showed that the announced chemical plant closures in Europe have surged a sixfold since 2022. So the total capacity now announced for closure reaches 37 million tons, which represents an astonishing 9 to 10% of the actual European chemical capacity. Now, if you say, okay, but maybe there is more investment coming in, so that offsets that. No, in actual fact, investment in the chemical industry in Europe pretty much fell to zero. And so what we're seeing is a significant decline. Now, the question is, why is that happening? Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the actual cost to produce in Europe is astonishingly high compared to other regions. And that has to do with the actual energy and feedstock costs in Europe, which are higher than other regions. It's the actual CO2, I call it tax, which we pay, which is not being paid in other regions. It's part of the emissions trading scheme. And my competitors in other regions don't need to pay that. And then thirdly, it's the actual regulatory cost and burden, which obviously ultimately translates in higher costs as well here in Europe.
So I see this. So you really have, I won't say unnecessary hurdles, because I guess it must depend on your point of view. But you've got things that delay and retard the progress the industry could make, which necessarily are not of your making. What is Dow's position on this de-industrialization when you've got so much of your business here? And what is Dow actually doing about this trend? And in your answer, give me a sense of the possible pros and the cons of the trend, because I can imagine you as a senior executive and leader with the teams you've got need to look at both sides of the argument, because you're dealing with the external environment anyway.
Yeah, no, you're right. And listen, I think a couple of things first. Europe's transition to a decarbonized continent is something we support. And the fundamental part and the objective of the Green Deal fully fits with what we would underline. However, there is a gap between that ambition and the actual execution. You need a roadmap to be able to get there, which needs to be pragmatic and unleashes investment to be able to transition to that, I'll call it clean and green transition. And in practice, what we're seeing is that there's a lot of obstacles being put in place which prevents a workable business case to be able to invest in that clean transition. Whilst we have a current business model, which is under pressure already from all of the things I just mentioned, plus on top, we have a lot of competition coming in from other regions as well, which I would even say is in many respects not a level playing field and playing by different rules of the game. And we'll talk maybe a little bit later about that. But it's incredibly important that that we understand that the inconvenient truth is that the current body of regulation will probably lead to the de-industrialization and not industrial transformation in the chemical industry. And then you could even put it in Shakespearean terms. As you're an Englishman, you probably would appreciate that. And it would be the tragedy of the Green Deal.
Okay.
And exactly. And it's trying to do the right thing, but achieving the opposite. And there's three objectives in the Green Deal. It's really about developing the new technologies in Europe to accelerate that transformation. I think that's what we're doing pretty well. Eventually also exporting these technologies, and that we're doing to a part. But then the actual application of these technologies in Europe through viable business cases and investment unleashed here, that's not happening at all. And that's the problem. We see, for example, to give you a practical example, in Terneuzen in the Netherlands, where we run the largest cracker complex in Europe with 3 crackers.
A cracker complex.
A cracker is really at the basis of where you start with producing chemicals. You literally crack the oil or the naphtha into building blocks to produce your chemical
so
products.
It's not a food item.
It's not a food. I would not.
Okay.
I would not. I would not say it's a food item. But that's at the heart and the center of everything we do. The chemical industry. We wanted to decarbonize that, but we were hindered by a lack of clear legislation, and it really hindered our approach to decarbonize that complex. And as a result, we started elsewhere, and I'll give you some examples about that a little bit later.
Well, I wanted to ask you, cui bono, who benefits? Which nations benefit from this?
Yeah.
China, the Americans, India, Southeast Asia, or all of the above?
Well, I would say, listen, the shale boom in the US.
This is the fracking thing.
And the associated gas, which comes from that, has really caused a significant investment into the US Gulf Coast. They're definitely taken a lot of the investment for the chemical industry, also in the Middle East, where they have the cheaper raw materials. But then what you see now happening is that the last 5 years, there's been a tremendous build-out of capacity in the chemical industry in China. Now, if that would be done on the basis like it's done in the Middle East and in the US, of lower ability to produce those products at a lower cost, and therefore you just can compete more competitively globally, that's all good. In China, that's not necessarily the case. Those products which they produce en masse are being exported all over the world, and they're competing at much lower prices than anyone else here in Europe, but on the basis of the subsidies they're getting either on their operational expenses or their capex or export subsidies. And that's where we need to be very clear that we need to create a level playing field, because that's part of the de-industrialization which is taking place in Europe as well.
So that's quite complicated, and it's not an easy task.
Not an easy task.
Level playing field always sounds like an easy thing to say, particularly in business, but it's a damn difficult thing to achieve. Today my guest is Marco ten Bruggencate. He's the president in charge of industrial intermediaries and infrastructure at Dow Inc. Corporated. We're in Horgen in Zurich. He is working essentially in the Europe, Middle East and Africa and India region. And we're talking about the deindustrialization of Europe. Marco, this might sound a little bit odd to ask you a question like this, but tell me why we should care about we being the general public, whoever they are, in deindustrialization. Shouldn't it generally be regarded as a societal good that this should happen?
Yeah, I think the chemical industry is sometimes called the mother of all industries, and I think that says it all.
But do you call it that, or do other people call it?
Well, it's called throughout. I would say society. People who understand a little bit where chemicals sit, because we actually are at the heart and the starting point of many value chains. And if that production leaves Europe, that means that all of the other sectors become more dependent on those imported materials. Now, you could say, okay, how much of a problem is that? Well, in a world that seems to be moving further and further away from freely flowing global trade, that could be a reason for concern. Also from a geopolitical point of view, do you want to preserve your strategic autonomy or not? We saw the consequences of this during COVID. We've seen it in the Ukraine-Russia war. We see it now with the Iran-US conflict. So this is something which we need to bear in mind when we make loose statements about do we really care about de-industrialization or not.
Not to sound flippant, but to use a children's story analogy, it sounds a little bit like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, where you cure the village of the rats, but you lose the children as a result of that. And it's really an interesting problem. But just changing the tack of the conversation a little, Marco, and I think you'll understand why I'm asking you this question. Your employees are well-educated and mostly highly experienced professionals with an expert knowledge of what they do and the markets in which they operate. I know that because over the years I've met quite a few of them personally. And in your interaction with them, what feedback do they give you about how they see their future and what Dow should be doing to be even better prepared for the changes you've talked about?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And you're right. We have a tremendously talented team at the company. And their feedback is, and what they want to achieve is to serve our customers in the best possible way. And that's the feedback we get every day on how we can improve that customer centricity, which manifests itself through our service levels, which we provide to the customers, our ability to innovate with customers and the speed at which we're able to do that, but also ensuring that our costs are continuing to be first quartile. So you're actually competitive in that marketplace. So yes, it's really important. We listen to them. We try to continue to improve and challenge ourselves. And I think this comes with curiosity, Michael, to put your ear to the ground and make sure you're never satisfied. You continue to raise the bar. And
just to be clear, when you use the word customers in your industry, you're talking about in the B2B model.
That's correct.
Not retail people who are buying in supermarkets or buying in big shops and department stores.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay.
Our customers could be, just to put that in perspective, automobile producers like the Volkswagens, the Audis, but also the P&Gs, Unilevers, those type of customers.
And what do your customers and suppliers and investors tell you about their concerns for deindustrialization?
Yeah, the customers are obviously concerned as well. Think about it. If the deindustrialization becomes a fact throughout Europe, then they obviously will need to rely on supply from other regions as well. So they don't have a choice anymore. And given the supply chain challenges we've seen over the last years particularly, and that volatility, which is not expected to ease, they're concerned. Secondarily, they're concerned because a lot of the imports and disruption happens not only at our level, at the chemical level, but also at the finished goods level. I'll give you an example. You see a lot of mattresses and furniture being imported from China, competing directly with our customers, again under the same set of assumptions which I said before, which is based on subsidies, enabling the export out of China to compete locally here at an unfair playing field with European producers. So they're not happy with it, let me put it like that. And the investors, listen, investors want to see a return. They want to make sure that we are creating, obviously, as they say so nicely, shareholder value. So they're questioning, rightfully so, what are you doing about it? What are the actions you're taking to serve your customers better, but even more importantly, make sure you've got that first quartile cost structure, and what are you doing in Europe to achieve that?
Just again, to change tack from another direction, to me, having spent all of my past corporate career, 25 years, in the controversies of tobacco, it didn't surprise me when I researched some of the controversies that have affected Dow and the industry in recent times, given the industrial sector in which you operate. Though my question, Marco, might be a bit unwelcome, please tell me how you've managed the major pollution and compliance issues that have beset you. Others come to mind, like air pollution, cancer risk controversies, plastic waste, and accusations of greenwashing. These are all real issues. Tell me, how have you dealt with these issues and criticisms?
Yeah, listen, it's one word: transparency. That's absolutely essential. And setting very clear goals and targets for yourself. We've done that over the last 20 years already in 5-year intervals with respect to sustainability, well ahead of the rest of the industry, not driven by regulatory measures, but purely to do better and set the bar even higher for ourselves.
Your initiative.
Correct.
You weren't pushed and cajoled into this.
No. So, and I think that credibility, which you're talking about, comes from the actions you're taking, not so much from the claims you're making. And that is absolutely essential to ensure that you retain and attract the talent and the people we've got within Dow, but also our customers, obviously, and other stakeholders, our investors. And in that light, you talked about plastic pollution. That is obviously a great example to talk about, and we provoked that debate internally in the company, but also in the industry. We were a front runner to set up the alliance to end plastic waste, because plastic obviously doesn't belong in the environment. That's very clear. So something needs to happen, but you need an ecosystem to enable to tackle that, particularly in the emerging geographies. And all stakeholders need to sit at the table to be able to do it. And we want to be part of that, and we want to invest in that.
I understand, and I know from my own personal experience that is a never-ending job.
No,
and a lot easier said than done, because you don't have control over that external environment. With your dominant market position then, and well over 30,000 employees around the world, tell me in summary, and this is not meant to sound like a naive question or that I'm setting something up for you, but what good does Dow do? Yeah, because you need to go home at the end of the day feeling that you've done something beneficial.
Absolutely, and that goes back to retaining and attracting talent to the company as well. It goes back to the point I made earlier. Our products, our solutions really provide more efficient food systems, preserving and enabling food all over the world, but also energy saving for buildings. It enables lightweighting of cars. We talked about that earlier, particularly important when you talk about electrical cars.
Because the batteries are so heavy.
The batteries are so heavy, and you want to make sure you get more mileage out of it. And for internal combustion engines, you want to make sure that you reduce the CO2 emissions. And you can do that when you lightweight the car. So in all aspects, lightweighting is important. I think the other thing which is important, we're investing in the communities where we operate, trying to make those communities better. We're not just an operator within the community. We're an active participant within these communities where we are. And one of the things I think is not very well known, but is incredibly important, is we are the first and only company so far globally who's invested in an integrated chemical complex in Canada to make that, to decarbonize that. And that is going on.
It's in simple English. What is an integrated?
Well,
it's
basically,
a big word,
it's a big word. But basically what it means is you start at a cracker, like I said before, you take the feedstock, you crack it into the basic building blocks, and then you make out of those basic building blocks, you make the chemical products which go into all of these markets we just discussed. And that's called an integrated. So it's exactly one very big site, which we decarbonize. And we're doing that because we believe there is an excellent market opportunity going forward, and our customers are demanding us to provide those materials to them. And we see that opportunity.
And Marco, just a closing question, but it's an impossible question. Listeners, we don't have a crystal ball sitting on the desk in front of us. Strategic planning, looking ahead, which is what you're paid to do, let's say 10, 15 years. How do you see the company and your region in particular changing compared with now? And you've been with the company quite a few years, you told me before. And how do you see the European marketplace changing, let's say, over that next 10 to 15 year period as well?
Yeah, I would like to think that Dow, in say 10 years from now, would be a leading provider of decarbonized and circular products to our customers.
Sorry again to interrupt you, but when you use the word circular, it has a special meaning in your industry.
Absolutely.
So just explain to me what that means.
Yeah, it's actually relatively simple. Take the example of food packaging materials. Right. At the end of life, we very easily discard of that still very valuable packaging, which could act as a raw material to produce new packaging, either through a mechanical process or through a chemical process. And that's what we're investing in, to make that whole ecosystem in terms of, first of all, collection, then sorting it, and then the actual technologies to be able to drive that circularity. And we're investing here in Europe, in several sites, in Africa, in the US, in India, to build up these ecosystems from the ground up. So I would like to think that we are a leader in those type of products, circularity, but also at the lowest possible carbon footprint.
Okay, thank you, Marco. I know you've got to rush off in a moment, but I really am grateful for the time you've given me this morning. Thanks for being so open and frank. For me, it's been an education, because I'm not an engineer or a scientist by background at all. I wish you continued success. Today, my guest has been Marco ten Bruggencate. He's President, Industrial Intermediaries and Infrastructure. That's one of the 3 divisions in Dow, and he also has oversight over the Europe, Middle East, Africa, and India region. Thanks for making time for me,
Michael. Thank you. Hey, let me just say one last thing. It's been a pleasure on your podcast, but I'm also an optimist, so I do want to close with a more positive, optimistic message from my side. I do believe, although we're at a crossroads in terms of de-industrialization, yes or no, I do believe that ultimately we'll make the right choices, pragmatic choices, which will enable the industry and the ecosystem for manufacturing in Europe to sustain and thrive, including the chemical industry. If we don't do that, we'll turn into an industrial museum. But I believe we'll make the right choices.
I too am an optimist, and it's great to sit beside one, even if it's just for 25 or 30 minutes.
There you go.
Thank you, Marco.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the McKay Interview podcast. You can find my show on most of the leading podcast platforms, plus the complete playlist dating back to 2012 can be found by writing the McKay Interview into your browser. Thanks again for listening.